Carl Jung discovered something that changes everything you think you know about waking up to reality. Across his most intense cases, he documented 8 illusions that people believe are absolute truth, until one day, something snaps. These illusions don't fade, they shatter completely, and when they do, the person who emerges is unrecognizable. Today, we're diving into the 8 illusions that disappear when you awaken. Recognizing even one might change everything. Jung spent decades studying people who seemed broken by life, absorbing everyone else's pain and blaming themselves for everything wrong. But here's what made his blood run cold. These weren't weak people. They were strategic minds, cataloging every manipulation and hidden agenda. They just hadn't activated that knowledge yet. The biggest danger in life comes from believing psychological illusions that keep you trapped. The first illusion that crumbles is the belief that you're a victim. For empaths and highly sensitive people, this illusion runs deep. You've spent your life absorbing other people's alcoholism, their rage, their dysfunction, spouses' infidelity, family members' chaos. You became the emotional shock absorber for every broken person around you. You blamed yourself when relationships failed. You apologized for existing. But here's what Jung discovered. That empath who seems so broken, they haven't been destroyed by abuse. They've been studying it. Every person who hurt or manipulated them, the empath knows their triggers, their insecurities, their deepest fears. They've mapped emotional patterns with surgical precision. Jung found that empaths kept detailed mental records of every person who had ever hurt them. They knew their abuser's triggers, insecurities, and deepest fears with startling accuracy. They just never used this knowledge, not once, until something pushes them past their breaking point. The empath's mind isn't a victim's diary. It's a strategist's war room, waiting for activation. The kindest people aren't weak. They're weapons waiting to be forged. When this illusion shatters, the transformation isn't a breakdown, it's a breakthrough. Shadow integration happens under extreme duress, forcing a choice between remaining a victim or becoming sovereign. Jung documented this across dozens of cases. These patients had spent their lives absorbing pain. And then came the clarity event, when their pattern recognition finally overwhelmed their need to believe the best in people. The second illusion that dissolves is believing your perceptions are wrong. Society teaches highly perceptive people to doubt themselves constantly. Every time you voiced what you saw, the lies, the manipulation, the hidden agendas, people called you too sensitive. They said you were overly emotional. They made you feel negative for simply stating obvious truths. When you expressed concern about obvious problems, you were accused of being judgmental or manufacturing issues where none existed. Jung found that empaths don't lose their minds from feeling too much. They lose their minds from being told their feelings are wrong. The truth doesn't disappear just because you stop speaking it. It accumulates. For years, decades sometimes, building pressure like psychological tension in a sealed container. Then comes the clarity event, when pattern recognition finally overwhelms the need to believe the best in people. Jung documented cases where empaths like Anna could identify psychological patterns with 97% accuracy. She spoke of others as if she had access to their private thoughts and hidden motivations. When Jung verified her observations through careful questioning, they proved remarkably accurate. She wasn't psychic. She was just paying attention at a level most humans never reach. Her brain processed not just obvious social cues, but unconscious emotional states, repressed content, and psychological patterns that others could not detect. She saw the depression behind forced smiles, sensed the desperation beneath confident presentations, felt the collective shadow that groups unconsciously agreed to ignore. When awakened empaths finally trust their perceptions completely, they become living lie detectors. They realize their sensitivity isn't a flaw. It's a sophisticated data processing system that sees through every social facade, detects lies instantly, and feels the unconscious tensions in every room. Your perception isn't the problem. Your perception is the most valuable gift you possess. The third illusion that crumbles is the belief in external goodness. This might be the most dangerous illusion of all. Jung spent years documenting people who were completely convinced of their own innocence, while systematically projecting their denied darkness onto everyone around them. In 1913, Jung treated a patient who would forever change his understanding of human danger. This patient was charming, articulate, and seemed genuinely concerned about others. But Jung noticed something that made his blood run cold. Every person this patient described as evil or manipulative shared identical traits that Jung recognized as the patient's own denied characteristics. Within 6 months, this patient had destroyed 3 relationships, gotten 2 colleagues fired, and driven his own brother to a nervous breakdown, all while maintaining complete innocence and believing himself to be the victim. These projectors don't consciously lie. Their brains literally rewrite reality to support their distorted perceptions. The person isn't consciously lying. Their brain has actually altered their perception of reality. Empaths aren't broken. They're alchemists in progress. The alchemist's path gives you drills, Jung-based boundaries, and 3 exclusive chapter videos to turn overwhelm into clarity. By Surreal Mind, 236-page downloadable ebook in stock. Begin now at thesurrealmind.com. They create what Jung called reality distortion fields, convincing not just themselves, but entire groups to see the world through their twisted lens. Jung documented case after case where shadow projectors destroyed reputations, relationships, and entire social networks simply by spreading their unconscious projections with absolute certainty. The awakened person learns to recognize 5 warning signs of dangerous shadow projection. First, absolute certainty about others' motivations without any room for doubt. They don't say, "I think you might be." They say you are with complete conviction about your internal states, motivations, and character. Second, complete immunity to contradictory evidence, no matter how obvious. No amount of explanation, clarification, or contrary evidence can shake their perceptions. They interpret your attempts to correct their misperceptions as further proof of their accuracy. Third, disproportionate emotional intensity to minor or non-existent slights. They have strong emotional reactions to perceived behaviors that others find minor or non-existent. Fourth, consistent victim narratives where they're always the wronged party. Fifth, recruitment behavior, trying to get others to see targets the way they do. The projector isn't consciously manipulating. Their unconscious mind projects qualities they cannot accept in themselves onto everyone around them. Jung realized this pattern wasn't coincidence. It was psychological defense. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But for most people, it's easier to attack the person reflecting their shadow than to examine what's being reflected. When you awaken to this pattern, you stop being gaslit by people who genuinely believe their own distortions. The fourth illusion that shatters is the belief in social harmony. Society functions partly through collective, unconscious agreements about what won't be acknowledged. The unspoken rules about which truths we ignore, which patterns we pretend don't exist, which shadows we collectively deny. Highly perceptive individuals threaten this fragile cohesion simply by existing authentically. Jung wrote that when someone sees through shared illusions that hold groups together, they become a destabilizing force. Organizations, families, societies all rely on collective agreements about what will and won't be acknowledged. The highly perceptive person inadvertently violates these agreements just by being honest about what they observe. Jung documented how these individuals couldn't engage in small talk because they saw through every social facade. They couldn't maintain friendships because people felt exposed and uncomfortable around them. They couldn't hold employment because their presence disrupted the collective unconscious agreements that keep groups functioning. Your superior function creates psychological and existential isolation. You become a mirror that society cannot bear to look into. Jung observed that the bearer of superior perception becomes the repository for all that the group cannot consciously acknowledge about itself. This pattern explains why these individuals don't just feel misunderstood, they feel systematically targeted by a force they can't rationally explain. When one sees clearly what others cannot or will not see, one becomes an island of awareness in an ocean of unconsciousness. The curse of consciousness is that it cannot be shared with those who do not possess it. The individual becomes an island of awareness in an ocean of unconsciousness. This isolation isn't just social, it's existential. These individuals often report feeling like they're living in a different reality from everyone around them. But here's what changes when you awaken to this illusion. You stop trying to fit into collective unconsciousness. You accept that your presence disrupts comfortable lies. You become what Jung called a consciousness pioneer, someone who makes the unconscious conscious. You transform from someone seeking approval to someone serving truth. Jung believed that individuals who successfully integrate superior perception become what he called culture carriers, people who help consciousness evolve. You're not broken because you see through social games. You're evolutionary. The individual has always been the carrier of the living spirit, the one who brings about change in society. The fifth illusion that dissolves is the belief in permanent identity. Jung called this participation mystique, a state where psychological boundaries disappear completely. Undifferentiated perception leads to absorbing external psychological material until you can't distinguish what belongs to you from what belongs to others. You become flooded with everyone else's emotions, thoughts, patterns. You absorb not merely conscious communications, but the entire unconscious atmosphere of your environment. Jung observed that people with highly differentiated intuition become overwhelmed by unconscious contents from others. You lose contact with your authentic self. The danger isn't just social exile, it's psychological annihilation, the complete loss of individual identity in favor of collective possession. Jung found that people who absorb unconscious contents from others often lose contact with their own authentic personality. They become so flooded with external psychological material that they can't distinguish between their own inner world and what they're absorbing from their environment. The awakened person starts the individuation process through conscious discrimination, the ability to distinguish authentic inner experience from unconsciously absorbed external content. Jung taught his highly perceptive patients to first recognize when they were absorbing psychological material that wasn't their own. He called this conscious discrimination, the ability to distinguish between authentic inner experience and unconsciously absorbed external content. The first task is to establish what belongs to you and what belongs to others. Without this discrimination, there can be no individual development. You learn to recognize when you're experiencing your own feelings versus when you're absorbing psychological material that isn't yours. Jung taught patients to spend time in complete solitude daily, allowing absorbed material to settle so they could recognize their own authentic psychological voice. Technique involves regular solitude to recognize one's own authentic voice amidst all the external noise. When this illusion shatters, you stop being an emotional sponge. You establish clear boundaries between your psyche and others. You reclaim your identity from the collective soup of unconscious absorption. You develop what Jung called psychological containers, the ability to hold others' unconscious contents temporarily while maintaining awareness that they are not your own. The sixth illusion that crumbles is the belief in powerlessness. Manipulators want you to believe you're permanently confined to the role of victim or people pleaser. They need you to think you're naturally weak, naturally broken, naturally inferior. But Jung discovered something that terrifies predators. Integrated empaths become psychologically untouchable. When you integrate your shadow, you merge the suppressed intelligence, intuition, and strength you were taught to hide. You become psychologically complete. Jung's patients hadn't been broken by abuse. They had been studying it. These empaths kept detailed mental records of every person who had ever hurt them. They knew their abusers' triggers, insecurities, and deepest fears. They had mapped emotional patterns with surgical precision. They had never used this knowledge, not once, until something pushed them past their breaking point. When empaths undergo shadow integration, they don't become less empathetic. They become perfectly empathetic, which means they are also perfectly strategic. They understand human psychology at a level that makes them nearly omnipotent in social situations. Not cruel, but precise. Not cold, but boundaried. Not weak, but selectively generous with their energy. The transformation makes you what Jung called perfectly empathetic and perfectly strategic. You can be incredibly kind to those who earn it and ruthlessly precise with those who don't. You can read people completely, but no longer need their approval. You understand manipulation, but refuse to participate in it. You feel everything, but choose consciously what deserves your energy. Manipulators fear integrated empaths, most because they can see through every psychological game before it's fully formed. These transformed empaths don't just heal themselves, they become immune to psychological abuse while maintaining their capacity for genuine love and connection. Jung realized these transformed empaths could no longer be victimized because they saw manipulation coming from miles away and neutralized it before it could take root. The awakened empath becomes incredibly kind to those who earn it and ruthlessly precise with those who threaten it. You're not losing your heart. You're gaining a backbone. You become selectively empathetic, still deeply caring, but strategically protective of where that care flows. The seventh illusion that dissolves is believing service requires sacrifice. Many highly sensitive people define themselves entirely by their ability to see and help others. They fall into what Jung called the helper's high, becoming addicted to being needed. They deplete themselves completely, defining their worth through how much they can give while receiving nothing in return. Jung observed that some highly perceptive individuals become addicted to being needed. They define themselves entirely through their ability to see and help others, losing contact with their own inner development. But this isn't service. It's self-destruction, masked as virtue. Jung observed that when perception becomes identity, the person disappears behind the function. This isn't individuation, but its opposite, the sacrifice of personality to role. When perception becomes identity, the person disappears behind the function. This is not individuation, but its opposite, the sacrifice of personality to role. The awakened person moves into conscious participation, using superior perception as a gift rather than a burden. They practice what Jung called service without sacrifice. Instead of depleting themselves to save everyone from unconsciousness, they serve the collective by developing their individuality, so completely it becomes a gift to the whole. The individuated person can serve as a bridge between conscious and unconscious, helping to make the unconscious conscious in others without sacrificing their own psychological integrity. They embody love with boundaries. They help others without destroying themselves. They recognize that the individuated person doesn't withdraw from the world, but engages with it more consciously. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, and then to offer that authentic self in service of the whole. Your sensitivity isn't meant to be martyred. It's meant to be wielded wisely. Jung believed that individuals who successfully integrate superior perception serve a vital evolutionary function. They see what collective consciousness is not yet ready to acknowledge, helping to prepare humanity for necessary developmental steps. The individuated person serves the collective, not by sacrificing their individuality, but by developing it so completely that it becomes a gift to the whole. They use their perception to contribute to collective consciousness evolution without attachment to whether others recognize or accept their contributions. The eighth and final illusion that shatters is believing awakening is a permanent achievement. Many people think integration happens once and you're done, permanently enlightened, forever transformed. But Jung discovered something crucial. Integration isn't a permanent state, but a dynamic process requiring constant conscious attention. Even successfully integrated individuals can regress under stress, trauma, or major life transitions. They stop maintaining psychological boundaries and become flooded with others' unconscious contents again. The awakened person understands that consciousness requires ongoing practice, regular solitude to distinguish your own psychological contents from absorbed material, conscious choice about when and with whom to engage, perceptive abilities, ongoing shadow work to prevent projecting your own unconscious contents. Jung discovered that people who see others' shadows clearly often do so because they haven't integrated their own. The more you deny your own capacity for deception, selfishness, or cruelty, the more disturbed you'll be by seeing these qualities in others. Shadow integration means acknowledging that you contain every human quality you observe in others. This doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you a complete person who can see clearly without judgment. Connection with others capable of providing reality checking and support. Creative expression as an outlet for overwhelming perceptual input. The integrated person doesn't achieve perfection. They learn to dance consciously with their own psychological complexity. They become balanced warriors, capable of incredible gentleness with those who earn it and implacable strength against those who threaten it. The final stage involves what Jung called transcendent function, using your perception to contribute to collective consciousness evolution without attachment to whether others recognize or accept your contributions. The individuated person works for the future, not for personal recognition in the present. So here's where we are. These 8 illusions, victim identity, self-doubt, belief in external goodness, social harmony, permanent identity, powerlessness, sacrificial service, and permanent achievement, they all keep you trapped in unconsciousness. They prevent you from accessing your full psychological power. They make you vulnerable to manipulation and self-destruction. But the moment you recognize even one of these illusions in your own life, something shifts. Jung spent his career documenting what happens when people finally see through psychological fog. The transformation isn't gradual, it's explosive. One moment you're absorbed in collective unconsciousness. The next, you're awake to patterns you can never unsee. Every empath will face their transformation moment, the betrayal so profound it forces you to choose between remaining asleep or finally waking up. The question isn't whether transformation happens, but whether you'll integrate consciously like Jung's documented cases, or let it consume you destructively. The awakened path isn't from sensitivity to numbness. It's from unconscious absorption to conscious choice. You don't lose your ability to feel deeply. You gain wisdom to choose what deserves your energy. You don't stop caring. You start caring strategically, protecting your gifts from those who would exploit them while sharing generously with those who honor them. Jung's research revealed that empaths aren't naturally victims. They're naturally powerful. Society just teaches them to suppress that power. When empaths finally awaken, they're not breaking down. They're activating abilities they possessed all along. The kindest people are often the strongest people, because kindness without strength enables dysfunction. If you're an empath, remember Jung's essential discovery. Your sensitivity isn't your weakness, it's your weapon. The day you learn to wield it consciously is the day you become truly powerful, not dangerous to innocent people, dangerous to those who would exploit your gifts. That's what the world needs. Empaths who know their worth, trust their perceptions, and refuse to dim their light. These 8 illusions will either destroy you through unconscious suffering or transform you through conscious integration. The choice is always yours. Consciousness is what transforms victims into forces of nature. If you recognized yourself in these 8 illusions, drop a comment below about which one hit hardest. Your awakening journey matters, and sharing your experience helps others walking the same path. Make sure to subscribe for more insights into Jung's psychology that can transform how you understand yourself and navigate human relationships. In The Alchemist's Path, perception training for empaths, you'll turn overwhelm into wisdom with practical drills, Jung-inspired boundaries, and step-by-step perception training. This guide includes 3 exclusive chapter videos to deepen each lesson. Written by Surreal Mind, 236 pages, beautifully designed 8.5 by 11 downloadable ebook, in stock now. Start your training today. Feel deeply while thinking clearly. Get The Alchemist's Path at thesurrealmind.com. Thanks for watching. See you in the next dimension.